Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Clayton Novlet, and I work in author communications at Written Word Media. And today we're very excited to present our first featured presentation as part of our newly launched speaker series. We're so excited to have you join us. Our speaker series features world-class and influential speakers on topics most interesting to authors and publishers. And you can stay up to date on future speakers by signing up for a free Written Word Media account at writtenwordmedia.com. Today, we are thrilled to kick off the series with an incredible speaker and author, Jess Ekstrom. Jess lives by three words: inspiration from frustration. Her book, Chasing the Bright Side, debuted as a #1 new release on Amazon, and Apple picked up her audiobook as their must-listen of the month. She thinks this is because of her Bill Nye the Science Guy impression she did while narrating. She is also the author of Create Your Bright Ideas, an interactive book for kids designed to help them become entrepreneurs. Jess has been featured on The Today Show, Good Morning America, Vanity Fair, and People Magazine ran an exclusive piece about her when her book was released. And now she's on our live stream. Jess is also a Forbes top-rated speaker and the founder of Mic Drop Workshop, an education company with the mission of empowering more women to share their message as public speakers. Her hobbies include writing, hiking, board games with her husband, playing with her dog, and searching for the best breakfast burrito in America. Please welcome Jess Ekstrom.
Thank you, Clayton. I appreciate you. Whenever I was writing my introduction, I'm like, this would be funny. And then when you're actually sitting there listening to it, you realize how ridiculous it sounds. But I am so happy to be here. One of my favorite things is helping people become thought leaders. And so the fact that so many of you on here are already, familiar with book writing, you've written a book, you're in the industry, just makes me so happy. And I really hope that you can get something out of this with how to turn your book into a keynote talk. So before we get into that, I'm going to give you a little bit about myself. So my name is Jess, and I'm the creator of Mic Drop Workshop and Book Pop Workshop. And Mic Drop really came out of a frustration of being the token woman many times on stage as a speaker and wanting to get more women on stages in those keynote spots. And Book Pop Workshop, same frustration of going into these bookstores, seeing a lot of the publishing deals being male dominated and wanting to help women get those book deals as well. Founder of Headbands of Hope, author of Chasing the Bright Side and Create Your Bright Ideas. Create Your Bright Ideas is my new book for tweens coming out November 15th, so right around the corner. And it is my book for kids to become entrepreneurs. So I'm so excited about that. And I am a professional public speaker. So this is what you might see on Instagram, giving a TED Talk. I was in a Canva commercial, speaking with Chip Gaines, speaking on stages. But the reality is my husband and I, we lived in an Airstream trailer for about 3 years. I can't, keep a succulent alive. I don't think that I own an iron, and I am just a regular person trying to go for it. And so I think sometimes we can equate speaking and thought leadership with people who have it all figured out. And I really been here to humanize it, because the best way we can get our messages and our stories across is by showing the real deal. So let's get into it. So if you've done the work to put your words into a book, first of all, congrats. I know from personal experience what a heavy lift that is. But I will also say that if you've done the work to put your words into a book, then you've already done the heavy lifting to put them into a keynote talk. And so that's why I think when Ricky and the Written Word Media team came to me about this topic, I was so excited, because I'm like, they've already done so much of the heavy lifting by writing a book. Let's just extract some of those messages and put it into a keynote talk. Events love to book speakers who are authors and pre-buy books for attendees, which is, I know every author's dream is for someone to say, yeah, we'd love to buy, 300 or 1,000, of your copies of your book. And that happens all the time with speaking. And speaking and writing, in my opinion, really go together like peanut butter and jelly. If you have a book, it really helps you get more visibility for speaking engagements. And when you speak at gigs, you end up selling more books. I got my publishing deal with Harper Collins because I was already a speaker. I really didn't have a big platform. When I got my publishing deal, I don't even think I had an email list, which now I'm like, what was I thinking? But I was starting to speak at colleges about my story, and they saw that I was getting visibility on stages and getting in front of crowds. And so they decided to take a chance on me. And because of that, I've sold over 85,000 copies of my book, and 70% of those book sales have been through speaking engagements. So, speaking engagements are a great way to sell copies of your book. I also love speaking to kids, which is what ended up getting me my book deal for Create Your Bright Ideas. So hopefully you're seeing the synergy of what speaking and writing can do together and how one can help the other. It's really a push and pull. So let's get into my 10 tips to get speaking gigs as an author. So tip number one, what's the theme of your book that could be turned into the theme of your talk? So no matter the genre of your book, whether you're fiction, nonfiction, self-help, romance, whatever it might be, you probably can nail down a key theme or a takeaway that could serve as the foundation for your keynote. And so maybe just think for a second, if there was like a chorus or one thing that kind of keeps popping up, maybe as you talk about your book, maybe it's resilience, or maybe it's confidence, or maybe it's, relationships. What is that key theme that keeps popping up when you talk about your book, no matter what the genre is? And if you're telling a story, what's the universal experience within that story? And so, for example, one of my speaker friends, he speaks about how he climbed all 7 summits. He's really impressive. He's climbed Everest and done all these crazy things. But what he does is when he speaks, he extracts the universal experience of climbing those 7 summits. So that way he can relate to an audience who will likely never climb Mount Everest. So instead of speaking about mountaineering, he speaks about how you can overcome challenges or what you do when you want to give up. For me, I speak about my story of starting Headbands of Hope. And most of the time, I'm not speaking to entrepreneurs who are also going to start their own businesses or have started their own businesses. A lot of times I speak to, at HR conferences or women's leadership events or sales events. But my universal takeaway from my startup story is maybe how we can train ourselves to be a little bit more optimistic so we can create the future that we want to live in. So what's the universal experience from the story that you're telling? You want your talk and your book to be synergistic, not like, oh, my talk is about confidence and, my book is about like all of my recipes that I've, created over the past few years. You really want one to influence the other, which is what brings me to my next point. Your book is your talk and your talk is your book. There is no need to reinvent the wheel or create new content from your talk that's not in your book. I see a lot of people who publish a book and then think that they need to create something new for their talk, but that's not the case at all. People want like what they already know from if they've read your book, they want to see that in your talk. Or if they've heard your talk, they want to read some of those same stories in your book. It's kind of like when you read a book and there's a movie adaptation. It's like you don't want them to be 2 completely different stories. And so instead of trying to create something new to create your talk, how can you make it so synergistic with your book that when someone loves one, that they're going to love the other and vice versa? So I see a lot of authors doing extra work. They try to say like, well, if they've already read the book, then I need to give them something new for my talk. Save yourself the work. That's not the case. When I give my talk that I give like over 50 times a year is called Chasing the Bright Side. And that's the title of my book. And so when people love my talk, they want the book version. They want to go buy Chasing the Bright Side. And so don't give yourself more work than you need to. Just see how you can adapt the core message, that universal experience from your book into a keynote talk, which brings me to tip number 3. I want you to have one signature talk to become a speaker. This is another pitfall I see a lot of speakers make where they think they need to be able to speak about everything. But no one wants to go to a restaurant that serves sushi, Alfredo, tacos, and burgers, like all on the same menu. I call that being a Cheesecake Factory speaker. And no hate to anyone who loves the Cheesecake Factory, but like, I want to go somewhere that's like, these are the things that we do well, and these are our 4 or 5 menu items that we know that we can crush. Because you can't be everything to everyone. In fact, in order to be successful, I think that you have to pick a lane. And in my opinion, that's great news because it's less work for you to focus on one signature talk instead of just trying to be able to adapt all the time and talk about everything. So, as a keynote speaker, your goal is to have one signature talk that you do really, really well. So, a lot of times I'll go on someone's speaking website, and instead of having one signature talk, they have a list of topics. They're like, I can speak on leadership, I can speak on confidence, sales. Anyone can list, a series of topics that they can speak on, but it's rare that someone can list one key takeaway from a keynote talk. Like, this is what I do, this is my product, this is what I do really, really well. And you've already done that, have that precise focus with a book. And so turn that book into your talk. And if you're struggling with where, if maybe your genre you feel like isn't quite fitting what a keynote talk could be, I like to do this exercise in my course, Mic Drop Workshop. We call it moment to meaning. So actually, let's do it right now. So I want you to run through the past week, or if you have, trouble with memory, maybe the past day, 24 hours, and just kind of run through it in your head like a film strip. And then I want you to land on one frame of your day that maybe meant something to you. Maybe it was something hard. Maybe it was something that brought you a lot of joy. Maybe it was, a really good conversation or just a moment that you want to remember. Then I want you to take that moment and extract the meaning from it. What's the universal experience someone can learn from? So, for example, I was in the drive-through line at Starbucks a couple weeks ago, and the car in front of me paid for my coffee. And so, of course, I get to the line and I pay for the car behind me. And that was a moment that really like made my day. And the meaning that I took from it is like, maybe our acts of kindness like don't need to be recognized in order to be good. They can just be good. And this is really what compromises a keynote talk is all of these different moments in your life or in your book, and what's the meaning that you can take out that someone can learn from. So really at the end of the day, think of your talk as a vehicle to solve a problem. I like to call this your transformation promise. What was the audience like before you came in to speak, and what is the audience like after they heard you speak? It's the same kind of feeling that you want someone who reads your book. What were they feeling before they read your book? What do you want them to feel after? And then we create a talk around that. But in order to create your talk and also to talk about what you talk about, this tip number 4 is really important. And it's called crafting your speaker statement. Speaking is really less about information and more about transformation. And here's what I mean by that. People like to walk away from either a book or a talk with a feeling, not facts and facts and facts of information. How do you want someone to feel after hearing you speak or reading your book? And so it's not about overloading them with information. It's about focusing on the transformation that you want to have on a person. So how can people apply the lessons learned in your story or your book to their story? That's the golden question at the end of the day that makes up your keynote talk is what can people learn from your story that they can then apply to their story? So this is how you would sum this up in a speaker statement. Hi, my name is blank. This part should be easy. And I help people blank. What's your desired transformation that you help people do? By speaking about blank. What's your story, your process, or how you help people get there? So for example, my speaker statement is, hi, my name is Jess Ekstrom. I help people become more optimistic by speaking about a scrappy startup story that led to a brighter future. That is my speaker statement. That's what I use on my website when someone asks what I speak on. I can have that clarity because people love people with clarity. Not the Cheesecake Factory menu, but like, this is what I do and this is what I do well. I actually have a funny story. When I was first getting started as a speaker, I, was like 21 years old. I was still in college and I had gotten one gig and I was like, oh, this was great. They actually paid me money to come talk about myself. Like, what could be better? And so I was trying to get more. And so I literally went on to Google and just found all of these contacts for colleges and universities, because that's where I'd spoken at before, and was just emailing them. And instead of telling them my speaker statement, I would just tell them my story. Hi, my name is Jess. I started a company called Headbands of Hope. I'd love to come speak to your students. And I was getting nothing from it. Absolutely nothing, like no replies. And I was wondering, I was like, is this even working? I sent so many emails that Gmail actually shut my account down. They were like, no, you're done. You can't send any more emails. And then once I realized that nobody cares about me and my story, what they care about is what's going to be in it for them and their audience. That's when I was able to change my pitch to less about me and more about them. So I help people become more optimistic by doing this. So your speaker statement, what do you want to help people do? How are you going to help them do it? So for example, my other student, Jill Anderson, she helps people define, declare, and live out their own versions of success by speaking about sorting your shoulds, like getting rid of the things that you should be doing. Get clear on your speaker statement, and that is going to make the pitching and sales process 10 times easier. It's really hard to quote and claim a value when you yourself aren't clear on it. So when you can get that speaker statement tight about what you do for others and how you do it, it's going to help you so much as a speaker. So tip number 5, this is a really simple one, but I think sometimes we get too complicated in how we make things happen, but I want to also include the simple tips in here. Use your book landing page to market yourself as a speaker. So if you already have a book that's published and you have a landing page where people can go and buy it, use that real estate to also market that you're a speaker. It can even just be one single section on that page with a contact form that says inquire about speaking engagements. And it can just be like name, message, what's the date of your event. And the reason why it's important to do this is because you want to take advantage of where people are already seeing you. Where is the traffic that you're already getting? Is it, on your book landing page? Is it to your coaching services? Is it to your LinkedIn? Where are people coming to you? And how can you insert real estate that you're a speaker? And not just insert the real estate, but ask for it. Like, book me as a speaker for your next event, or like, whatever it might be, but give them an action that they can take instead of just listing that you're a speaker. And your book landing page is a really great opportunity to do that. Eventually, you can turn this into a full speaking page with like videos and your abstract of your keynote, maybe testimonials or clients. But for now, just take advantage of the traffic and the eyes on your book just to make it known that you speak too. And again, what you're also doing is you're capturing that excitement that someone has for your book and they want more of it. So like, oh, I loved this book. How else can I engage with this author? Oh, I can get the keynote version and bring them to my next event. So how do we actually find where these events are? Tip number 6, set up Google Alerts for conferences. I'm not sure if any of you have used Google Alerts before. They can be the best, but also the most annoying thing in the world, but they can be really helpful when it comes to speaking engagements. So setting up a Google Alert is basically Google will send you an email for when a key term that you put in is used. So you can have a Google Alert set up for your name. Whenever your name is published somewhere, Google will alert you of that. But what you can also do is use Google Alerts to list out conferences that list out keywords that will send you when there's a call for proposals. especially conferences that are in your area of expertise, even author conferences. Like I spoke at the National Library Association, when my book came out. So there's so many different conferences, even for writers, that you can use Google Alerts for. So for example, these are some Google Alerts that we use and that I teach in Mic Drop Workshop for my students to put in there, like call for speakers, call for presenters. Whenever this is published anywhere on the internet, you will get an email. Call for TEDx presenters, keynote speaker needed, annual summit, women's leadership conference, or put in whatever industry area of expertise that you want to speak to. If it's a diversity and inclusion, or if it's you really want to speak at HR conferences or whatever it might be, the more specific you can get, the better, because you can get more targeted Google alerts sent to you. Here's also another tip. Use those same Google alerts that you set up and follow those hashtags on Instagram. So you can set up a hashtag to follow, like a annual summit or conference or keynote speaker. And anytime, a post is used with that hashtag, you can follow it, see where that event is, see who's spoken there, and it can give you some visibility to those events. Tip number 7, name it and claim it. So we can find events all day long and search high and low for them, but people can't book you to speak if they don't know you're a speaker. So that is why naming it and claiming it is so simple, but super important. The first step to getting booked to speak, and the easiest, most important step, is adding the word speaker to your bio. So similarly to what I was talking about with your book landing page and having like that visibility where people are finding you, think through everywhere that you have touch points. Is it, on Instagram? Is it an email list? Is it LinkedIn? Business cards, if you use those. How can you just add one simple word, speaker, to your bio? In fact, I just did a training on LinkedIn for how to use LinkedIn to find speaking engagements. And one of the main ways that you can do that is in your LinkedIn headline. Those are the terms that come up in LinkedIn's SEO. And so to have the word speaker in your headline means that you're now in, like, you have the chance of coming up in that SEO search if a meeting planner is using LinkedIn to look for speakers. But better yet, have like any kind of specific topic around your word speaker, like diversity and inclusion speaker or women's leadership speaker or whatever you might want that to be. That way it can really get specific when people are searching for you on LinkedIn. But like, even just take a minute right now and think about everywhere people have touch points with you, and how can you add the word speaker just to start getting that visibility, because people can't ask you to speak if they don't know you're a speaker. And you also might be thinking, well, what if I haven't given a talk yet? Like, what if I haven't, had a keynote yet or gotten booked to speak? Can I still say I'm a speaker? I say, in order to start getting the talks, you have to start naming and claiming that you're a speaker. I think that you're an author when you start working on your book. You are a speaker when you start putting it out there that this is what you want to do. So no one's going to come knocking on your door and say, by any chance, do you give keynote talks, if they don't have any visibility that you have a want or desire to give a keynote talk. Better yet, after you name it and claim it, start creating content around what you want to speak about. So we talked about what your core message might be. What's that core message of your book that can be the core message of your talk? Is it confidence, resilience, relationships? And then how can you start using your social platforms, a LinkedIn newsletter, or whatever it might be, to start creating content around what you want to be known for? Because when you do that, excuse me, you start to attract people who want to digest those kinds of topics. And better yet, you can even say, like, when I speak about relationships and I usually talk about this. So find ways to weave in your content that you're also a speaker. Or if you're being interviewed on a podcast, a local news station, find ways to weave in your answers. Like, well, when I speak about this topic, I usually talk about this. It's really just putting it out there, naming and claiming it. One time I was in the back of an Uber and I was heading to a gig, and the Uber driver asked me where I was going, and I said I was speaking at an event. He told me that his daughter was like conference coordinator for some other event. I gave him my card. She ended up booking me for a conference like 2 years later. So you never know where these gigs are going to be unless you start putting it out there that you're open to them. So tip number 8, apply for your local TEDx talk. So TEDx is a really great way to start getting credibility as a speaker, because TEDx is a really recognizable brand, and also get discovered for future gigs. A lot of meeting planners will go on to the TEDx site and like sort through different local TEDx videos, and any ones that they like or topics that they like, they find that speaker's information and ask them to come speak. I gave a TEDx talk like when I was like straight out of the womb of being a speaker. I had literally only had like 1 or 2 gigs under my belt. And this was like 8 or 9 years ago. Don't look up the TEDx talk because it wasn't even that good. However, by being able to say I was a TEDx speaker, I had a TEDx talk, it really helped give me a launching pad for myself as a speaker. And it's a great visibility for your book, because whenever they introduce you or you introduce yourself in your TEDx talk, it is author of blank book. So TEDx is a really great way to get credibility as a speaker and also get discovered for future gigs. So if you go to ted.com/TEDx/events, they have an entire map of all of the TEDx talks around the world, which I know is really overwhelming. So I would start in your local regional area, find TEDx talks around you, and then you can use LinkedIn to type in like TEDx Raleigh or TEDx Atlanta, and then see who the meeting planners are for those events and reach out to them individually and figure out when and where their call for proposals are. Tip number 9, actually, let's take a breath for a second because I need a sip of water. Hopefully you guys are getting some good information. We're almost there. So tip number 9, when you speak at events, get a sponsor to cover your books for an event. So this is something that me and my team learned like a year after Chasing the Bright Side came out. We were like, oh, this would have been so much easier than sometimes begging the event planners to pay my fee and cover costs of the books, which sometimes they do, or a lot of times they do, but sometimes it's easier to get a sponsor to cover the cost of your book. And then what you can also do is offer to have a private lunch with that sponsorship team. And so if a sponsor at an event buys, 300 or 500 copies of your book, you can say, and, after my keynote, there's usually, a lunch or a dinner or something like that. And you can have that one-to-one time with that sponsorship team. And they love to be able to get that special attention. And if time allows, this one is, people love. So let's say like Coca-Cola sponsors your books for this event. Go on to like Canva or Vistaprint or any kind of printing service and print a bookmark print a thank you bookmark to that sponsor with their logo on it. So when people open their book, they have like, thank you Coca-Cola for sponsoring these books for XYZ conference. They absolutely love that. So sponsorships are really great ways to get your books purchased in bulk when you're speaking at events. So tip number 10, I don't know why the slides are messing up a little bit, so sorry if you can't read that, but if you have a book coming out, use your speaking fees to pre-order your book. So I know all of you are authors or you're in this industry, so you know how important pre-sales are. I remember when, Chasing the Bright Side was coming out and my publisher was talking about pre-sales. I was like, why would someone order a book before it comes out? That just seems silly. And then when I learned about like all of the lists and pre-orders getting traction for your book and counting towards the first week of sales, I was like, oh, we should totally be running pre-order campaigns and incentives. Speaking is a great way to get pre-orders for your book. So let me talk a little bit about budget ranges and then some ways that I think that you can do this. So what I'm seeing in the past couple of years of speaking, and I know that we've had some shifts for the pandemic, but I think we're in a really good spot now with speaking. So anywhere from free to $5,000 is your typical budget for schools, local organizations like Rotary clubs, and virtual events. So those are really great ways if you're just getting started and kind of just getting your training wheels. Reach out to your alma mater, your college, your high school, and see if they have a couple grand where you can speak. And again, if you have a book coming out, you can put those towards book sales for the audience and get those pre-order numbers up. $5,000 to $10,000, general conferences and associations. I put exclamation points around associations because I think they are such a secret sauce when it comes to speaking, because associations have dozens, sometimes hundreds of different branches and chapters, and it's kind of like a domino effect. So when you speak at one association and do really well, then all those other associations want to have you too. So for example, let's say you speak at the Women's Realtor Association of Florida and you do a really great job, then the Women's Realtor Association of New York will want to book you, and then the one in Indiana and Georgia. And so associations are really great ways for spin-off opportunities. And so you can kind of speak at one gig and turn it into 5. And then 10K and above, you have your corporate events. Typically summits that are annual have a higher budget. And then events that are multi-day. Those typically are your 10K and above speaking events. And sometimes what I see speakers do is they say, okay, 30% of my fee, my speaker fee, will go towards book sales for attendees, and or go towards pre-ordered books for those attendees. And that could either be used as giveaways. Some conferences want to use them as registration incentives, or it could be like first come, first serve. But here's something really important for authors to understand when it comes to budgets for speaking events. Budgets for speakers are typically different than budgets for books or other products, sometimes called a merchandise budget, swag, or product budget. Oftentimes, events have different buckets. So maybe they can't pay your 10K speaking fee, but they can pay a 7K speaking fee plus $3,000 from their product budget to go towards your books. So if you're ever in a negotiation with an event and they say, oh, we can't do 8, we can only do 7, then you can counter and say, well, do you have, is it within your product budget to, buy $1,000 worth of books for your attendees? So those budgets are typically different. So those are 2 different levers that you can pull. Some things that will increase your speaking rate: when you get testimonials, that can increase your speaking rate. More experience that you have, obviously, that speaking rate can go up. When you have footage of you speaking, you're 4 times more likely to get booked for an event, and or if you've released a book. So after I release Chasing the Bright Side, or after I'm going to release Create Your Bright Ideas, my rate will go up because my demand will go up. But also think about what else is valuable to you. So let's say you're in a negotiation for a speaking event. You are quoting 10. They're like, look, our cap is 7. Instead of just being like, okay, 7 it is. Say, well, let's try to make this a win-win. And here are some other things that are valuable to me. Will they commit to writing a testimonial for you? Will there be a videographer where you can get that video footage and use for a demo reel? Will there be a photographer where you can get some really high quality photos of you speaking? Will they let you sell your book or your product? So even if they're not going to pre-buy it, can you sell it or have a book retailer come sell it in the back of the room? But this last one, I find really, really effective, and I don't see a lot of speakers doing it, is you can say, if you're satisfied with, my talk, will you do 5 email introductions for me after this event to other speaking opportunities? And then whatever they do say yes to, put it in your contract. So if they say yes to doing a testimonial, if they say yes to giving those introductions and referrals, put all of those in your contract, because I have had way too many times where we've agreed to something on the phone, like, of course I will do, XYZ thing for you. And then as soon as you finish your talk, they're like, great, thank you so much. And then you don't get that. So whatever it is that you agree to, that's money and non-money agreements like testimonials, referrals, or footage, make sure that you put it in your contract. And also when you're negotiating your rate, try framing your questions. So I see so many speakers, and this is with speaking or just negotiation in general, negotiate against themselves before the other person has even responded. And one of my friends, Maggie Palmer, she's the founder of Pep Talk Her, and she helps women negotiate. And like, the definition of negotiation is a conversation to reach a mutual agreement. And so that's exactly what it is. Instead of like thinking of it as like controversial or touchy, negotiation is a conversation to reach a mutual agreement. So instead of saying, do you have a speaker budget? Because that's insinuating that maybe they don't and that you would do this for free. Say, what is your speaker budget? And that says, this is my product. I don't do this for free, but in a really nice way. Another really great question that you can say when they ask, like, what's your fee, or you're talking about money, is say, well, where were you hoping to land? Or historically, what's your budget been for this event? And then it just becomes a conversation where it's less about feeling angsty around quoting a price and more about like, how do we make this a win-win? And where you're getting what you want and we're getting what we want. At the end of the day, this statement is just so important, but oftentimes we say, my fee is blank, but let me know what you can do, or let me know if that's within your budget, or let me know if you can't do that, we can negotiate. If you can just say, my fee is $5,000, my fee is $7,000, my fee is 10, whatever it is, and just stop talking, which I have to say this to myself all the time, because clearly I can I can fill an empty room with talking. My fee is blank. Because when you show that flexibility or negotiation right away on your fee, it's no longer a fee, it's a suggestion. And you've put too much hard work into your book and therefore into your talk to leave money on the table and leave that value on the table. And, a lot of times, I hear people say, well, I don't know how anyone would hire me to speak for $7,000 for just 1 hour of my time. But the reality is speaking is not an hourly rate. So no matter if you're speaking for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, it's going to be the same fee, because it's not an hourly rate that they're paying for. They're paying for everything that you have done over the past however many years to be able to go up there and deliver that value on stage. So they're paying for the countless hours of you writing your book, the experiences of what have taught you to be able to go up on stage and speak. So when you show that kind of flexibility on your fee, it's no longer a fee, it's a suggestion. And remember that if you have done the work to write the book, which is a huge, heavy lift, no matter what genre you're in, then you've done the work to give the talk. You've already walked inside your brain more than anyone in this world probably has. I know the amount of introspection and commitment and daily dates with yourself it takes to write a book. And what you're really doing is you're taking those 60,000 words and putting them into a 1 hour highlight reel for your talk. So if you've done the work for the book, you've already done the work for your talk. So just go ahead and go for it. So I will stop there. and hopefully answer any questions that you all have. And feel free to follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn, and you can learn more about what I do at micdropworkshop.com. But thank you guys so much. So Clayton, I don't know if I can see questions or if you want to tee them up.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tee up the questions that we've got here. Yeah, thank you so much, Jess. That was so interesting. I thought
Yeah, absolutely.
The point around like pricing your time, right? Like it's so
Yes.
easy because you speak for a certain period of time to think of it as the talk as, getting paid however much for just that hour. But that's not at all what it is, right? It's all the work that goes into it and the experience that you have as well that gives you the
Totally.
opportunity.
Yeah. There's this story. I won't go into the whole thing, but it was this printing press that malfunctioned like a week before Christmas, way back in the day, and they couldn't get into work. All their advertising, budget was at risk. So they called this retired engineer and said, "Can you come in and fix this?" And he like walked around for like 1 minute, and he took a penny out of his pocket and he turned a screw and was like, "It's now going to work." And they were like, "Thank you so much, invoice us for your time." So he invoiced them for $10,000, and they were like, "How is it that much money? You were here for like 2 minutes. Can you itemize it?" So he sent them back an itemized invoice. It said $1 for turning the screw, $9,999 for knowing which screw to turn. So that is exactly what it is when it comes to speaking and writing. It's like $1 for actually doing it, but the rest of it is just for knowing how to do it.
Yeah. that makes complete sense. Yeah, it's interesting. You don't think about it that way at first, though. So like Jess said, if anybody has any questions, please drop them in the comments, and I'll do my best to pull them up here on the screen. Let's go ahead and start off with a question from Grant. And so let's see here. So Grant is wondering if it's easier for nonfiction authors or fiction authors to get speaking gigs. Jess, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Grant. So what I will say is maybe the bridge from book to talk is shorter for nonfiction, because typically when people hire speakers, it's for some sort of takeaway. And that takeaway is probably maybe a bit more front and center in nonfiction. However, I will say, like, the industry is changing so much, and I have seen fiction authors like become, really notable in whatever it is that they are, whatever that core message is of that fiction book. For example, I even think I told the written word team this. One of my favorite fiction books is called Black Buck, and it's like a satirical memoir. But it's also has some self-help messages in there. And I know he goes around and does a lot of speaking. So I would say that the bridge is closer for nonfiction, but it's definitely not impossible for fiction. And I think people are looking for that kind of spice and diversity on the speaking circuit too.
Right. Maybe it's about there's a little more creativity to get to the
Exactly.
message, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But I think that people, fiction has had such a boom that I think people would be really interested in hearing what a fiction author has to say and maybe how they're taking the characters of their book, or maybe it was even the process of writing this book for you that is the universal experience that you could teach from.
Right. I mean, Adina here says, she's a sci-fi author and considers herself a STEM speaker, right?
Oh, yes. I
Yeah.
love that. And like I was saying, in one of my tips, like, that's so synergistic, Adina. And, it's really like people don't have to jump too far from your book to your talk. And so I think that is like a great speaker statement right there.
Yeah. Very cool. Let's see here. Michael is wondering if it's easier to get virtual gigs or in-person gigs for speakers that are maybe just starting out or maybe inspired by your talk today.
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. So, obviously, virtual has been the name of the game since March 2020-ish, give or take. But I will say that now, speaking, like, I would say like 90% of my gigs are now in person, and 10% are still virtual or some sort of hybrid model where they still want me there, but they're going to live cast it. So I would say go for the in-person. I think that people are really wanting that in-person connection. You have event planners who have been sitting on their event budgets for 2 years that haven't been used. And so they're like ready to make an event like bigger, better than ever. And so I would say actually my answer would have been different 6 months ago, but today I would say in person might actually be easier than virtual.
Gotcha. Is there a big difference in how you prepare for a in-person versus virtual event, or is it pretty much the same process for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, a couple tips for virtual. Uh, One, obviously your technology, like be bougie, get the ring light, get the Blue Yeti mic. I know it might seem like you're an influencer, but just do it. It helps a lot. Do your speed check beforehand. Um, and then also understand what technology that they are going to be using. Are they going to be using Zoom? Are they going to be using Facebook Live? Like whatever it is, that way you can kind of know the lay of the land before you go up there. But as far as the content of your talk, the content can remain the same. I try to push for shorter in virtual because it can just be so taxing sometimes to be sitting there and like looking at the end. And something that also I would say, just a tip for virtual speakers, when I started doing virtual during the pandemic, I had no idea how much my self-confidence came from emotional like reactions from the audience, and like hearing them laugh or looking them in the eyes or whatever it might be. And so at first it made me really flustered because I would be going through my talk and you're just looking at the green dot. You have no idea what people are thinking. So it was actually a really great challenge for me as a speaker to get confident in what I was doing despite audience reciprocity. So that's one tip I would give too, is just be able to do your talk confidently without needing, the applause or the laughter, because you're not going to hear it.
Right. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, right? I think a lot of people would think that giving a talk in person would be, a lot more intimidating and maybe, more nerve wracking, but you get that feedback from the audience. And generally people are excited to hear what you have to say. And so it
Hmm.
can actually be a confidence boost as opposed to kind of a takeaway to be in person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I will say, just being able to look at the green dot is tough, and I still have to remind myself that of too. But look at the green dot instead of like looking, down here. Yeah.
Right. Great. All right. So Ellie is wondering if it ever feels unprofessional to sell yourself, and then when should you hire someone to represent you?
Oh, that's a really great question, and I think something that is so um, uh, tough to navigate. Like, I don't know if any of you all felt that like this when you're releasing a book, especially if it's a memoir or your personal story, where you're like, oh, I feel like I'm selling myself. I'm putting myself on the shelf. Um, but what I will say is that the best thing you can do as a speaker or as an author is remove your ego and almost see like your own self persona from your keynote or from your book. Because at the end of the day, it's not like they're buying Jess or like Elle's story. They're buying whatever it is that transformation is that you're selling. So I would shift your mindset from selling yourself to selling a solution to a problem. And that's what your, keynote should be, is like, you hire me to talk about this, and this is what I'm going to do for you. So in that speaker statement, that can kind of help feel like you're not selling yourself. But what I think you're also talking about, Elle, is like, should you be the one doing the negotiation or should that be someone else? I did my own sales for years before I hired a manager. And so I think I got to a point when I was speaking like 10 times a year. That's when I hired help. You can also start to get listed on bureaus. Those are just basically speaking rosters that people go to when they're looking for speakers. I wouldn't wait by the phone, but it's great to just get that visibility.
Gotcha. Excellent. Very cool. Well, thank you so much. I believe that is about all the questions here. Thank you for all the kind words, everybody.
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah. So I don't think we have any more questions. So yeah, I think we'll wrap it up here. So yes, Jess, thank you so much for being here and inspiring us with your story today. I'm sure everybody listening is very grateful for all the tips that you gave us. And for those of you that want to learn more about Jess, you can visit her website at jessekstrom.com. And we'll go ahead and comment on the various social feeds, her website, in the comments as well, so you can easily get to it. And if you like today's content, please sign up for a free account at writtenwordmedia.com to learn more about future speakers. And Written Word Media, if you're not familiar with us, is a marketing hub for authors, and we'd love to have you join the community. And so, yeah, thank you for joining us today, and I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks, everyone.